And welcome to the biggest night of the year to this point, the YBL Selection Show. I'm Miles Wilhelm, the commissioner of the YBL.
I'm Drew Sursa, as always.
And it is a big night, let me tell you. Lots of delegation.
Hours of debate.
Lots of thought. We had a committee of about 7 to 9 guys.
It's 2 a.m. right now, guys.
Yeah, everyone was talking, everyone was sharing their thoughts. And, I mean, there's going to be 2 teams to get the X tonight that, I mean, we could not figure out how to leave them out of this pool of 8. But at the end of the day, you know, not everybody makes it. And I'm super excited to get through and reveal these 8 teams. So many teams have fought and competed this year. And there's a lot of teams that deserve a shot to compete for the trophy. But, we got to narrow it down at some point, and that's what these conference championships are for. We'll get into that in a second, but yeah, big night ahead.
I mean, it was crazy. I mean, all of us delegated for hours and hours. We wrapped up the season today. As Miles said, we're about to get into the conference champions, so let's just jump right into it. 2 days ago, the MVC finished up, and the Prowlers finished. They were 6-0 in the conference, and they didn't disappoint. They won a close game against the Gladiators, but they won the MVC championship.
Yep, the Prowlers looked awesome this year. They have one blemish on what's otherwise a spotless record. They've been awesome all year long. Ryan Myatt has put himself in this MVP conversation. It's crazy to think he wouldn't be. And Cole Curtis has been about as reliable as a number 2 as you could ask for in this league. He's certainly going to be up there for that comeback player or the most improved player of the year award. He's had an awesome season so far. And this Prowlers team deserved everything they got this year. They got into the conference tournament as the number 1 overall, so all they had to do was play one game. They were able to knock off the Gladiators 21-19, and you know they just asserted their dominance once again. They're a great team. That's our Mississippi Valley champion, and next I say we go to the SWIC.
Yeah, heading to the SWIC. A little bit of a Cinderella there. You had the number 5 Lumberjacks. You know, they were 1-5 in conference play. They were very good out of conference, so teams had high hopes for them, and they won their first game and their second game, defeating the Hot Dogs and then the Hot Shots. But unfortunately, they fell to the Mallards 22-12 in the second game, which led to a Goonies versus Mallards championship game. Game went down to the wire, finals 21-19, and the Mallards upset the Goonies and took a huge SWIC conference championship win.
Yeah, this Mallards team, if you remember, opening day, first game of the year, Mallards took a 6-point loss to the Goonies in a game that a lot of people were surprised by, and now it's almost the reverse. Everyone sort of had the Goonies pegged to be this SWIC champion. And they couldn't pull it off against a Mallards team that's really good. They've battled some injuries this year, had a lot of different players, but ultimately Hank Gomrick, we still think, is the best player in this league, and he looked like it tonight in that great win over the Goonies. Nestor played his role perfectly, and yeah, Mallards executed a huge win, and they have secured themselves an automatic postseason berth.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say Hank wasn't the best player this year. The only count on him is the amount of games he played. But yeah, heading into the Big 5, which I personally think was the most exciting championship of them all. You want to get into that?
Yeah, Big 5. I think no one can disagree. I think this was probably the closest conference. Down to the end, every single team was really competitive. The Pterodactyls made an awesome postseason run. If it hadn't been for some really bad struggles in the regular season, this team might be a playoff team. But they unfortunately fell in that semifinal game to the Aviators. And the Aviators, of course, my team, eventually went on to defeat the Scorpions in the conference championship game. So it's the Oak Hill Aviators, the preseason conference favorites, that are going to be the 3rd automatic lock into the postseason.
And as you mentioned that, I will say that the Mallards were also the preseason conference championship for the SWIC. So good job, analyst team. We got that one.
Yeah, almost
66% right.
Almost perfect. Pretty good. So we have ran through the 3 teams that are automatically in. I think it's time to get into the 4 teams that aren't making the tournament this year.
Yeah, so starting at the bottom, you had the Bull Dance. That's Max McCollum, and then Dylan Voss mainly, but also some Mason Cummings. And, you know, they were a good team. You know, they have a very good win over the East St. Louis Goonies. They had a lot of close losses, but unfortunately, they ended the year with only 1 win, and that's just not going to be enough to make it, and they're going to finish as the bottom team in the league.
Next is the Shiloh Hotshots, team that most of the year, pretty much every game was Jimmy and Cal. Of course, we had a sub in the playoff game, but never really got anything to click. They're solid in conference, 3-3, but out of conference, they sort of got knocked around a little bit, especially by those Big 5 teams. They played 4 Big 5 teams and couldn't get a single win out of those. So they finished the year at 3-8, and it's just ultimately not going to be good enough to make the tournament this year. Hotshots, good season, but they will fall short of the big dance.
Yeah, and then heading into another SWIC team, you had the O'Fallon Hot Dogs. They finished 12th, Mason and Lucas. I think that's where they were roughly supposed to finish. I think they're the most physical team in the year in the league this year. I mean, they were a good team. They had some good wins, but 3 wins, 5 losses. Lost in the first round of the tournament. I mean, we have a lot of good teams, and it's just not going to cut it.
Yep, and finally, our last team that unfortunately we're going to have to close the book on, a team that really did, when they were on, they played really well, the Sojay Pterodactyls. A really rough regular season, but they really kicked into gear that conference tournament. Picked up 2 big wins to start against the Reapers and the Predators, but unfortunately fell short in a really good game against the Aviators. And, 4-8, that'll just have to close the book on the Pterodactyls season.
I mean, that's why, you look at the regular season. This is a team, every game is important, and, I wish they took some games more. I wish they cared a little more in some games, and if they did, they could very well see themselves being selected, but they are going to finish 10th. And, yeah, so those were the bottom 4 teams that we did not think deserved a shot, and then we're going to start from the top now, right?
Yep, without further ado, it's time to get into our 8 teams that are heading to the big YBL tournament, and the number 1 overall seed, to nobody's surprise, the Prowlers. What a season they put together this year. Like we said, just 1 loss, and it was a game where they had played so many games already that day. They were a little tired, but man, they just flawless in conference play, won their conference championship, took care of business every step of the way. Prowlers looked great this year, and they are very much deserving in this number 1 spot.
Yeah, this team started later than most teams, so they were kind of almost slept on, but then they just picked up win after win. They dethroned the number 1 seed at the time, Goonies, and they just soared from there. They won the championship, and this was pretty an unanimous number 1 seed for them.
The number 2, a team that sort of swooped in at the last second with a big conference championship win tonight, the Metro East Mallards. They finished the season 6-2. They looked really sharp in conference tournament play. Hank Gomrich really came into his zone in that conference tournament, and they jumped the Goonies and take that 2nd overall spot on the 1 line. So that is our 1 seeds, the Prowlers and the Mallards.
Yeah, they were well deserved. That game, we played them twice. We split. The Mallards were 6-2. They were great with Nick. And then Hank's obviously one of the best players in the league. That's just 100% deserved. I fully agree.
Our number 3 overall seed, also coming out of the SWIC conference, it's the East St. Louis Goonies.
Yeah, so we played a great year. We won 10 straight wins. It's the longest win streak in YBL history. Unfortunately, we took a late skid. We lost 4 straight, and that's why we dropped from the 1 to the 3. And I'm happy with our season. We're excited to see who we're gonna play. And yeah. Yeah,
a rough final 4-game stretch for the Goonies, but no one's questioning this team's talent. It's all there. They haven't really ever looked bad in a game, and they're certainly raring to go for this postseason. And I'm sure there's a bit of a bad taste in their mouth after that rough Mallards loss in the conference championship game. So super excited to see the Goonies as a 3 overall seed, and that brings us to the number 4 overall seed, the Big 5 champion Oak Hill Aviators.
Yeah, obviously they just won the Big 5. They played 2 great teams to do it. And I think this is well deserved. They kind of got off to a slow start. They were winning and losing, and they were kind of teetering above 500. But towards the end of the season, they really propelled their season, and with 2 huge signature wins. And I think this is well deserved.
Yep. So we have now revealed our 3 automatic bids: the Oak Hill Aviators, the Pontoon Beach Prowlers, and the Metro East Mallards are the automatic bids. Of course, the Goonies not an automatic bid, but they're up there on the 2 line with the Aviators. Let's hop into the 3 line, the 5 overall seed, and that's going to reveal our first matchup of the tournament. The Oak Hill Aviators will be taking on the Ladue Lumberjacks.
Yeah, another team in the SWIC. 3 of the 5 right now are SWIC teams, and the Lumberjacks are a weird team. At times they were 3 in the AP poll, but towards the end of the season, they kind of went on a little losing streak. They had some questionable losses, and people were questioning if they would make the tournament. And
exactly.
They responded well to that in the SWIC, and they got to the 5 seed. They jumped up what many people would have thought. And the Lumberjacks and the Oak Hill Aviators played this year, so I think it's gonna be a great series.
I think for the Lumberjacks, it was sort of a win and you're in that first conference tournament game, and they took care of the Hot Dogs, and that's why they find themselves sitting in the tournament. And that takes us to our number 6 seed out of the Big 5. It's the Predators.
Yeah, Jack Bruning, he didn't have the biggest sample size this year, but when he was on the court, he showed out. Obviously, this is the second matchup revealed. It will be the 2 and the 3, or the 3 overall versus the 6 overall, which will be the East St. Louis Goonies versus the Belleville Predators. This is actually a team that they had not played in the season, so I think that's very interesting to see how this goes. And it's going to be a great game. You know, the Predators ranked very highly in a lot of analyticals, so I'm happy with that.
Yep, our 2-3 matchups officially set. It is going to be the Belleville Predators against the East St. Louis Goonies, and it's going to be the Oak Hill Aviators taking on the Ladue Lumberjacks. And now we are down to our final 2 spots of the tournament, coming in as the number 7 seed, the Swansea Scorpions.
Yeah, I mean, this team, you know, kind of took a late skid. You know, they were off to some strong play. You know, the question with them is, where was that big win? They had the chance in the championship versus the Aviators. Unfortunately, they couldn't get it done. So they skidded a little bit to the 7. But yeah, I mean, they're a great team. They're going to be taking on the Metro East Mallards. They also haven't played, so some interconference matchups. But I think we should go to the number 10 overall seed.
Yes.
It's a suspense.
So, well, first, I think let's just knock out. We have 3 teams we have not covered yet. One of them being from the Big 5 is the Riverside Reapers, and then we've got 2 teams out of the Mississippi Valley Conference, the West Side Earthworms and the Gateway Gladiators. And let me tell you, this was a really, 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 really tough decision.
I mean, the committee spent so much time on majority of these 3 teams, and the reason it was so hard is because the head-to-head is in a triangle. The Earthworms beat the Reapers beat the Gladiators, and the Gladiators beat the Earthworms. So it was very hard to judge teams off that, and you looked at similar opponents, and it was just so shockingly similar that it really made this impossible to, do.
The Gladiators had 3 battles against the Earthworms this year. Gladiators took 2 out of those 3. The first 2 were games that were played between Avery Irwin and Austin Watson were the Earthworms team, and then it was Andrew Like and Grant on the Gladiators. And the Gladiators won that first game in pretty convincing fashion, and they really let that second one slip away. And I think that's a lot of what the committee saw with the Gladiators is like, man, if they really could have just pulled it together in that game and won that was theirs for the taking. Not necessarily that the Worms deserved that win, but they wound up getting it over the Gladiators. And then the rubber matches in the conference tournament, a game that Avery Irwin was not in, instead Brody Bugger and the Gladiators absolutely dominated. So the Gladiators sort of have that edge over the Earthworms. When it comes to the Earthworms and the Reapers, they have matched up 1 time this year. It was a non-con battle that came down to the absolute wire, a game the Worms took 23-21. Super close game. Reapers had a good chance to win that game there in the end, and that's another one they kind of let it slip. And a lot of people took note of that, but at the end of the day, the win's the win, and the Earthworms have it over the Reapers right now.
Yeah, and then the Reapers beat the Gladiators by 7, 22-15, and that was with both teams healthy. And that was a great win from the Reapers. I know Braden Vall shot like over 70% from 3. He really showed out when he needed to. And I mean, these teams have a lot of good wins, and some have bad losses. Like the Gladiators were 2 points away from winning the MVC championship over the Prowlers. They had that game almost handled, and Ryan Myatt and Cole Curtis were able to come back in that. But the Reapers do have the singular win over the Prowlers, and that's a big point for them. They also have some bad losses. They lost 21-6 to the 6th seed Belleville Predators. So we don't know how that's going to impact them as well.
So let's get into some stats here. Offensive efficiency this year, the number 1 team in that category out of those 3 teams is the Reapers. They were actually one of the more efficient teams on offense in the entire league this year. And though it might not have shown in their record, they were up there ahead of teams like the Predators, the Aviators, the Lumberjacks, all of which teams that are going to the tournament. Gladiators ranked 8th in that category, the 14 teams, 2nd of the 3. And then the Earthworms brought up the rear there, 10th in the league in offensive efficiency.
Yeah, and that efficiency takes into account your points, your assists, your rebounds, and then your effective field goal percentage, which is your 1s, your 2s, and all of that and how efficiently you do it. And the Reapers were pretty far ahead of the other teams, but which was maybe surprising. But then moving on to the offensive points per game, the Gladiators were the highest at 7th. They averaged 18.36 points per game on 11 games, while the Reapers were just a knock behind them at 18.08, and they played, I believe, 12 games. And then the Earthworms were down at 13th at 17.23. And keep in mind, we do keep in mind like the subs and everything, that every game is weighted differently based on what subs were played. But then moving into the defensive rankings, the Reapers were the highest at 8th. They were 19.25. The Gladiators were then at 11th at 19.82. Oh, sorry. The Worms were 9th at 19.38, and the Gladiators were 11th at 19.82. I mean, that is all within a point of each other. So again, it's splitting hairs.
Yeah, it's a really close margin. That offensive efficiency is really a big boost for the Reapers, though. Obviously, they've kind of separated themselves from the pack in that regard. I think let's move on next. We looked into the records of these teams against the teams that are already in the tournament this year. So like the 7 teams that are locked in. And that's where the Gladiators really took a hit. They were 0-4 against those 7 teams. 3 of those games beat against the Prowlers. They obviously lost all 3 of those meetings. And then the other one that they lost was against the Ladue Lumberjacks, a 7-point loss. When we get over to the Worms, they were 2-5 in that regard. Their wins being over the Predators and the Scorpions. And they lost 5 assorted games. And then the Reapers, same record in that category, 2-5. Their wins being over the Predators, and obviously I think they take the cake for the biggest win of any team in this group, the 4-point win over the Prowlers, who obviously number 1 overall seed in the tournament.
And another slight con with the Predators with the Reapers, is they beat the Predators without Jack Bruning. And that was weighted into the committee because they put with Nolan Mendonca. While he's a great player, he's no Jack Bruning. And so that was taken into account, and I mean, it's so close.
I think it's time to get into the number 10 team. This team will not be heading to the tournament this year. We really wanted to put them in. It was tough. The Westside Earthworms are going to miss out on the big dance this July. They finished as the number 10 team, a game under 500. It was really tough to keep them out, and we really wanted to do everything we can to get them in that tournament, but the resume just didn't line up. They did not look good in a lot of their high leverage games. It's tough to lose games like 21-7, 21-9, 21-11, and when against the Gladiators, they just didn't show up. I don't think the Earthworms resume quite lined up, and I get they had that win over the Reapers, and that in a game like that, it comes into such a razor-thin margin. But you look at things like just point differential. You know, Earthworms sat way behind the pack when it came to that. The Gladiators were minus 16 in point differential, Reapers minus 14, and then the Earthworms at minus 28. It's just so tough. They just took, I think in the committee's opinion, too many just really bad losses, and that's ultimately what knocked them out. When the records are all so similar, and I believe the Earthworms are 6-7, we had the Gladiators 5-6, and the Reapers 5-7. When the records are all so similar and so razor thin, bad losses like that, and the efficiency stats don't lie, and I think that's ultimately what keeps the Earthworms out of the tournament this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. They're a great team. You know, they won 6 games, lost 7. Avery Irwin's one of the best players in the league. But I mean, you know, they were lacking, you know, on offense, and analytically, it just, the stats did not love them. And, you know, that's a big part in how we take into account everything. You know, the head-to-head over the Reapers was also heavily debated, but it was a triangle, as I stated before. And, you know, it's just so hard to leave these teams out.
It really is.
You know, we feel like they all deserve it, but
I think it's time for our last team in. And you know what? It was super tough, and there was so much delegating that went into this, but this team's gonna get their shot. The Riverside Reapers are going to the tournament as the number 8 seed. They will take on the number 1 overall seed, Pontoon Beach Prowlers, a team that they beat earlier this year. So it's gonna be a fun game, fun series to watch. Hopefully we get to see the Reapers battle out against these guys. I'm super excited for them.
Yeah, excuse me for kind of smiling. Braden and Ferb are 2 Reapers players are right behind me, and the pure joy when they just heard their names called is just like lighting my face up. But you know, it's bittersweet because obviously that means the Gateway Gladiators are gonna fall to the 9th, and it sucks for those teams. You know, they deserve it. But
you know, I'm sure the Gladiators and Earthworms don't want to hear anyone's sympathies right now, but it's unfortunate that someone has to miss out, and it was them. It was so razor thin, and we looked at it every which way. We were plugging teams in, taking them out, and ultimately we decided that the Reapers proved themselves. They got a huge win over a team like the Pontoon Beach Prowlers. That's ultimately what's keeping them in this, and they had a lot of convincing wins, and I think that's kind of what it comes down to with this team. You know, you look at like a 9-point win over the Gladiators, a game like that's really big. A 7-point win over a Pterodactyls team that has really looked good down the stretch. And the efficiency stats don't lie. They lost a lot of heartbreakers, and that's ultimately, it's been really tough to swallow for those guys. You know, losing by 3 points to the Aviators, losing by 3 points to the Scorpions, losing by 2 points to the Worms. A lot of heartbreaking losses, and stuff like that, you know, sometimes it's an indicator just getting a little unlucky. And I think that's what the Reapers have thought all year. that they really have about 2 or 3 games they're looking at on that schedule. They're like, man, we could have definitely won those games. And I don't think the Gladiators and the Worms can say the same about a lot of their losses.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big thing is the whole reason we did it this way, right, rather than the prior seasons, was that it wasn't just record, so we could really look at a team's body of work. And again, that Prowlers win is just so big because
it really carries it.
The Worms and the Gladiators have some good wins, but they don't have that big of a win. And they have a lot of close losses for the Reapers. And I think that was ultimately like the decision. And the analytics love them. You know, it kind of pointed them being a little unlucky. And that's why it ultimately went with that. But like, believe me when I say it took so much debate and every which angle was looked at.
I think another tough thing the committee really looked at hard, which like especially the Gladiators, team that went 5-6 this year. Of their 5 wins, 3 of them came against the worst team in the league. And that's just it's tough to really see what the talent is with a team like that when they play 2 out-of-conference games. And they lose both of them pretty convincingly. You know, this Reapers team really wanted it. They were as much as anybody trying to schedule these non-con games.
Yeah.
They really wanted to be a part of this year. And I think that of the 3, I think we've concluded that they deserve the chance the most.
I mean, we ran through all those teams. Just to reiterate, so our matchups will be the 1 overall and the 8 overall, which will be the Prowlers versus the Reapers, which is the 1 and the 4. And then just moving directly down, you'll have the 2 and the 3, which is the Oak Hill Aviators versus Ladue Lumberjacks. Then you get into the other section, which is going to be the number 1 Mallards versus the number 4 Scorpions. And then you'll have the number 2 Goonies versus the number 3 Predators. So
we're really looking forward to this tournament, and you know, we're so glad that we finally came to what we think was the best conclusion on these 8 teams. Thank you so much for watching. We're so excited for the playoffs to get underway. From the YBL headquarters, I'm Miles Wilhelm.
I'm Julius Ursa, as always.
We'll see you next time.